Okay, here we go. Yeah, already it looks that way. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, like I was thinking about the deal with the 13 band graphic equalizer and the frequencies, the similarities of what teleprompting is as far as like measuring cycles per second and oscillation in that way of not necessarily considered special effects of waveform, although frequency by comparison to waveform, not necessarily anything more than adding pitch and tone and highs, mids, and lows in that way to each designated type of frequency. Normally a 13 band graphic equalizer covered quite a bit in that way, predominantly more so during stereo, not necessarily limited to, but yeah, quadraphonic was around, yeah, but the home theater and the surround thing, sound thing is a whole different ballgame. But I was thinking about the measuring cycles per second and oscillation. What would even be representative of the line, and the 13-band graphic equalizer ultimately got to the point of impedance and ambience as the two. It's kind of like it's almost like the impedance and ambience of the putt-putt deal about the golf course, yeah. So it's kind of like almost like the the skydiving parachute, isn't it? With the salesman, right? The skydiving caviar salesman, yeah, trying to provide a more informative presentation, beyond the Prince of Wales, yeah, with lobbying strategy, yeah, yeah, sure. Even that making it beyond the front lines of the beachfront couldn't even admire, right? Yeah. So anyway, it was kind of like the plain horizon of the 13 band graphic equalizer as compared to the 13 stars and the 13 colonies of like American history, and that altimeter thing about the not necessarily limited to if it needs to be the thing about a jet stream or whatever the case may be, but as far as like plain horizon goes in importing and exporting, and what international law dictates in that way between what tariff is to protected, it's like the thing about the protected 200-mile thing around the United States, having that of I don't even know if it's still 200 at all. Like during the bicentennial quarter and the 200-year celebration of America and all that. I mean, it's like all that 200 stuff was like so just like when and where, like world, national, local news and newspapers, front page and headlining and main articles and columnists and editorials and as far as like I don't know if I'd really call it an archive division of like history, predominantly what the intent were point of origin for what practical application, distinguishing the difference like between the legal media and deposition, and like that old time law called the constitutional law. Hey, all right, yeah, and that ratifying and codifying thing somewhere like a digital media, right? And processing speed of attenuation that dictates whether or not you have a signal processing, and processing speed is the only real reality and difference of that one word being the UA and the attenuation thing about electronic power, and the alphanumeric thing about 140 and all that stuff about attenuation. But anyways, like I was thinking about the flat plane horizon, like in the form of like the straight line being representative of even the Wyatt Earp thing and the exclusionary rule provision thing and that pi r squared thing, and like the tennis thing about the advantage of 30, right? And in that way of like the score equating to some like reality of like the circumference, predominantly what pi r squared is sometimes used for, in addition to the actual diameter. Like likewise, in addition, it automatically normally provides that for a flat plane surface of a circle, normally 360 degree of a flat plane surface. That means like automatic perception of that, pi r squared, and that 3.1416, and equating to like, 3.1416 equating to like 30 in the pi thing. Some people might consider, a pie chart like the thing about 30 and the Bible and the baby and math and all that stuff about, the 30 thing. Or in any case, yeah, so like my thing is about the pronunciation as well as spelling, and get into the pi and the pi r squared thing, and something about the known fact. It's even a spiritual principle of like, basing, because of it's a known fact, and that it's really taught and led to believe that it's really a known fact, not necessarily anything other than maybe a lack of experience of not knowing, just, there's such a huge difference between believing and knowing. It's like unreal. And, I've heard that before, but really, truthfully, until someone really knows, they, without a doubt, know the difference. And it's not just like, yeah, sure, we all know that kind of like thing, but yeah, in any case, it's kind of like the court, and the ground rule double. And it's kind of like, it's too like the Fred Flintstone thing in the Cars song, right? You work okay, safe enough. Life's the same, moving in stereo, life's the same, except for my shoes thing. It's kind of like, you gotta be kidding me. And then it got to like the absolute values of even, like the due west, the compass bank due west, 90-degree right angle, and 90-degree angle being like a quadrant, like a computer programming, computer language of like architecture, platform, embedding and encryption, okay? So like, it's kind of like the big four thing, okay? And it's like that spherical quadrant, of globalization, as far as like, what I'm looking at as far as like the plane horizon and the pi r squared and the actual diameter, and the line and the ERP thing, all the way through it for real. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, it's kind of like I was thinking about that because I for the first time, I was kind of like thinking about the putt-putt thing, and the impedance and ambience was like such the 13 band graphic equalizer, and it was like my deal about teleprompting as compared to like prompt command, and something about the color codes that goes beyond calculus. Normally at the highest levels of what you would find on a 13 band graphic equalizer isn't probably the signal processing of waveform in that way going beyond, calculus and to other, areas of certain types of formulas that would be a little bit of like an introduction, like the absolute bars and values of like introduced when I was going through algebra. I mean, it was like, once again, yeah, okay, that algebra introduced that word algorithm. In any case, it's kind of like, during that time during algebra, I don't recall really ever using the word algorithm at all, other than knowing it was being introduced predominantly at the same duration and period of the absolute bars, and certain types of rules that would be applied, like through 3 different rules of applicable, and only when it's applicable, knowing which rule to pick for like nomial, binomial, trinomial situations in that way. So anyway, so like in any case, so like I was like thinking about all that because the line, the 3 rules of like that alone is kind of like, the pyramid, the 3 sides of the rule. Okay, that's, I'm so about the degree principle. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's such a huge thing with like virtually to the highest levels of degrees. Like, I mean, of like beyond genius. I mean, how serious they are about that principle thing, man, and being interchangeable in that way of compatibility is phenomenally like so. It sometimes, no matter how basic or how complex, I mean, eventually it will, reveal itself. I mean, if it's the seeking ye shall find thing, it'll probably repeatedly, if you can even find it and not be involved with it, and then, find it and realize that, hey, it even gets better, more seriously into the degree of something like even, knowing anyone involved with it, let alone finding it, the kind of like thing is like, wow. So anyway, I was like looking at a lot of stuff like that in that way, because like I was reading the entire Black's Law Dictionary, okay, and I was like looking at that Wyatt Earp, okay, the John Wayne thing, because of the hop scene thing, okay, and it's kind of like the paying for gold for like socks and garments, like the gold rush thing. And I was just the way I was hearing it, it's kind of like, well, hey, maybe you're like, maybe, the jaywalker, and you're really painting for pearls, at the pearly gates of heaven, kind of like thing, not necessarily the gold rush, and all that like symbolic representation, like you see on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, uh, um, like, but that word above the pyramid, I knew it. See, Holy America, I call it Holy America or whatever sometimes, about the division, spirit of adoption, and certain other factors like a telepathic birth at the same time, a formula of simplicity into the complex beyond practical application of principles, kind of like really. I thought I'd have that to say while I'm thinking about it, because like I'm already going on a little more than right at 11 minutes right now. But anyway, yeah, so like now I'm studying that about the marginal spread and terminology with like New York Stock Exchange, in the way of like I don't really say it to be sarcastic, other than maybe humoring myself sometimes about, it's really not the economic plea bargain, Ponzi scheming, voucher, rattling voucher, auctioneering clearance and warehousing, right? Well, anyway, so like really gets to whether or not if something in that way is actually identified, whether or not if a categorization of an overhead expense that was granted in that way as an investment, and ultimately it being used in that way, ultimately it paying itself off in that way, and no longer being an overhead expense and becoming was more than likely granted normally anyway as an overhead expense, and actually meeting all the requirements of like what a fixture really might mean, of municipal annuity, or there's like the thing I have about fixtures and municipal annuity, that really, I need to look into, but there's like something about that in a way of like ergonomic participation, or what human capital means in a way of whether or not if all that terminology involving like representative in the way of like managing factors that promotes whether or not if a non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is only a defective leave of absence through negligence of just being suggested as a not having the degree level to maintain that kind of management, and in that way, because truthfully so, when like a circuit is involved, even with all the degrees, and not all being together as a right to assemble, and it's kind of like, once again it gets to that deal about the line of an endorsement. It's kind of like, is it like, hey, don't forget you endorse your entire employment history, okay? Yeah, so like, don't forget, potentially, the contributive factors of charitable cause, the fame and the glamour and prestige, like it's all that like glamour and prestige. yeah, like having the right to assemble, yeah. Symbolically, being like an icon, like ergonomics suggests is like almost symbolic in a way of what participation, and acknowledging that as that. And it's amazing how ergonomics in a way of symbolic representation is very much something of practical application, in that way of maybe even a religious issue of like idolatry, but ultimately it gets to like, even whether or not if like a third party easement in real estate. I don't think it's limited to the real estate, but all I've ever really known and really got serious about, really trying to trace is did escrow originate from something of religious venue? Is it like from Israel? Is it like just an English thing, or is it just like a real estate degreed thing about escrow as an intellectual easement, and what does that mean in human capital, in a way if it's acting as if the only thing about a third party is an easement of a release of obligation in the way of what the freedom of speech and the freedom of press means. And once again, in circuit, when it's practiced, it's like, it's not that a non-profit organization is, you know, throwing the one and only of like the Fifth Amendment. No self-incrimination. Is like, hey man, like, do you really know? Wait a minute, man. Are you sure you just like watching television, man? Yeah, sure, yeah. Like, you really got to go on with that skin tone, right? Yeah, so anyway, like, all that stuff about the Fifth Amendment, it's kind of like, you know, you got to be kidding me. And, you know, it's like, once again, it gets all the way to the de facto thing. I was just thinking about it. And it's like, and it just seemed like a once in a lifetime. The way I was like really starting to hear it on television and radio, it's like it was just like a once in a lifetime thing that whether if anyone knows it or believes it or even recognizes it in any kind of way, even knowing all that and even really even being able to do anything about it, I mean, the right way the first time and like not make any mistakes is ridiculously attempting to try not to be, you know, considered a total nut. It's like you're going to be so smart, you're not going to know exactly what to do, where to start thing, you know, with that kind of like brains all around the world, right? So anyway, so like I was kind of like, you know, thinking about a lot of stuff about, you know, like what world history is to a world-class statement. Normally associated, the phrase normally associated with like that world class is like J.D. Powers and involving General Motors, and predominantly when I was like studying predominantly United States Supreme Court, focusing on that one word, de facto, it got to the point whether or not if the similarities of de facto would even be the same similarities of intellectual in the way of whether or not even escrow itself set up as a third person. They identified the word party, and political science majors normally do not, but they thoroughly suggest it beyond, you know, perception that, you know, when you hear the word party, it's almost like, you know, identifying, you know, that, hey, there's liquidal equity within range, you know, I mean, you know, so it's kind of like in political science, it's kind of like, you know, when I hear that phrase political science, automatically I think of sometimes the side of liquidal equity in the way of the same principle of like, you know, hey, you don't have the degree kind of like thing, and you know, or what non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is to even banking. And normally where that phrase is in real estate is normally the non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, found to be used quite a bit involving real estate. And I don't know if I would choose the word opportunity or, you know, when I think about, you know, like a copyright law involving entertainment law and equal employment opportunity in a way of what classifies to employment in business law and corporate law is, with compatibility between corporate and business law, as well as like what an equal employment opportunity means to entertainment law. I mean, when it's in circuit, it's like you know, I was talking to my mom and dad, but you know, after my mom had passed away, I talked to my dad to stuff like this, more so than really truthfully anyone. And I was telling Dad, you know, it's kind of like, you know, like when it gets to like the copyright law, most people's perception that anything of like entertainment, like intellectual easement, like a compact disc or, you know, MP3 flash drive, you know, like USB memory storage flash drives, you know, or whatever the case may be, as intellectual in that way, even DVDs or like motion picture, okay? Well, anyway, so it's kind of like, it was getting to that easement of having and able to use the value of the content. I mean, it's like, you kidding me? Like a daily transaction at the bank, it's kind of like, having the right to assemble, huh? Wow, like, are you kidding me? Like, you mean everyone endorsed their entire employment history at the bank? And everyone has the right to, are you sure they know if they still have the right to assemble? Do they know where they're at this moment? Yeah, come on, man. Like, you lost in space now, right? Yeah, sure, man. Liquidal equity, sure, man. Yeah, right. So anyway, so it's kind of like it gets to the thing about the equal employment opportunity, because you know, that equal sign in sometimes algebra is the one and only test of algebraic test of inversion. And anyone who's even thought of, you know, just knowing something about alphanumerics and that one thing about algebra, and just the does or does not equal thing. Does the answer equal the results? The way that one specific algebraic test of inversion is, it's like either it equates to equaling each other or it doesn't. And really, that's really the whole entire point. Sometimes of appearance of like, having the appearance of like, that in alphanumerics and the meaning totally having a completely different value at the same time. Although it looks like it doesn't, but it does kind of like that. And that's kind of like really what that, truthfully, and when I was like kind of like realizing something about the principle, I mean, I went on for like years, like realizing the principle is starting to be like a major mandatory requirement. So I like started looking for the principle quite a bit, and then when I like realized I maybe using that algebraic test of inversion, and applied to like alphanumerics. Anyway, it like goes on and on and on. Well, anyway, so like the equal employment opportunity and like labor law in that way, like entertainment and like programming and television as a transcript or even a manuscript in a way of like what television and radio provide to it, viewing and listening area would be almost kind of like the consumption as a request, and maybe not even know that they're actually accused of watching something or even speaking, referring to, what participation might mean or in that way. So, and realizing consciously what equal employment might suggest is whether or not if there's any reality of if it ultimately gets to having the right to assemble as an entire employment history of endorsements and every daily transaction of endorsed check at the bank being suggested as a charitable registered charity or even whether or not if that in fact is justifiable cause stating that therefore it is not like identity theft in the way, and that the intellectual duration of having fair use and the right to assemble of the value maintaining its like third party easement value, like it had been purchased and paid for to have use of it, and it's like everything that is done about it is so legitimately legal, it's unfreaking real, that anyone who doesn't know that is probably extremely upset and like not knowing that, and even if they knew it before and really didn't realize what's involved with it, and it's like unreal, not funny. So anyway, yeah. So there was like something about that, So I'm trying to find some like meaning beyond, my toilet paper is computer literate, comparable to scientific notation, but but hey, hey, how about that swordfish, right? You have the Mickey Mantle, Marlon Brando, no fly zone, Marlon Brando swordfish thing, yeah. And the ground rule double, yeah, all right, yeah. So it's like back to the advantage of love 30 and the tennis and the baseball and the 90-degree right angle on the baseball field and the marginal spread of like New York Stock Exchange and like international financial management terminology of the marginal spread and the ground rule double. And hey, even Fred Flintstone, yeah, and the absolute values like of those two like 90-degree right angles, like lifting up the absolute bars of absolute value and computation all the way through algebra and calculus and on into like the quantum and physics and all that stuff. I mean, absolutes I think all the way beyond what would be normally like teleprompting in way of frequency and not necessarily waveform of special effects and audio production. And it seems to be like a real big deal, but how the United States Supreme Court reporters use that symbolic representation in reality of like the symbolic waveform that is separate beyond what teleprompting would only suggest as verbal, as compared to translating it into something symbolically, if you want to call it telepathic or silent in that way, of visually only knowing what the symbolic representation means in that way. And normally only court reporters who really use the real thing really know that all that symbolic representation is like very much gives the impression and appearance of like waveform, as compared to like transcript of actual verbal communication, or even the excuse that how that prepaid postage in the mailbox is ultimately getting to a current resident issue, and like it's like above all the entire banking system or attaching anything less than than being above every form of money on the planet, in the World Bank in North America, right? Or what have fair use in that way of like a bunch of circuits and currency. Thoroughly never claimed that the degree ever had to have anything to do with geographically attaching citizenship and birthrights, just because it was a predominant form of money that's normally disregarded as like assumed to be automatically a known fact where that's happening, when that's the biggest excuse known to mankind on the face of the earth of a national deficit, you know, available in closed caption for the hearing impaired kind of like thing, and how that grants about, you know, third person and proper English grammatical composition, even to the national anthem thing. Yeah, all right, yeah. All right, so anyway, like, I'm gonna take a break, okay?